Have you ever noticed what you say to yourself when nobody else is listening? Not the words you speak out loud, the quieter words. The sentences that appear in your mind when you make a mistake, look at your bank account, think about your future, or face something you don't know how to handle. Maybe you tell yourself, "I'm always behind." Maybe it's, "I never have enough." Or, "People like me don't get ahead." Sometimes the dialogue is so familiar that you don't even notice it anymore. And that may be the most interesting part, because the thoughts you repeat most often can gradually influence what you pay attention to, how you feel, and the decisions you make. Your inner dialogue may seem like harmless background noise, but what if it is quietly helping shape the way you experience your life? Think about it. Every day you receive thousands of pieces of information. You see opportunities, problems, conversations, choices, numbers, people, possibilities, and setbacks. You cannot consciously process all of them, so your attention constantly filters what deserves your focus. And your repeated thoughts can influence that filter. If your internal conversation is usually focused on danger, lack, failure, or disappointment, you may begin noticing evidence that supports those expectations. Not because your mind is trying to sabotage you. It is simply becoming familiar with a particular pattern of attention. Maybe you've noticed this before. You think about buying a certain car, and suddenly you start seeing that car everywhere. The cars were already there. Your attention simply became more sensitive to them. Then something similar can happen with money, opportunities, relationships, and personal progress. If you repeatedly tell yourself that opportunities are rare, your attention may become more focused on obstacles. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are capable of learning, you may become more willing to notice possible solutions. This doesn't mean that thinking positively magically changes external reality. It means that the conversation happening inside your mind can influence what you notice, how you interpret experiences, and what you choose to do next. And those small choices matter. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and immediately thinking, "I have too much to deal with." Before you've even gotten out of bed, your body may already begin responding to that thought. You feel pressure. You feel resistance. You expect the day to be difficult. Then something small goes wrong. You miss a message. You receive an unexpected expense. Someone disagrees with you, and your mind says, "See, nothing ever works out." Now, the event isn't just an event. It becomes evidence for an existing story. This is how an inner dialogue can become a pattern. The thought creates an emotional response. The emotion influences your behavior. The behavior creates another experience, and that experience can reinforce the original thought. Day after day, the cycle can become increasingly automatic. But here's something important. Automatic doesn't mean permanent. Your brain is capable of adapting. Repeated patterns of attention and behavior can become easier with practice, and new patterns can also be developed over time. This is one reason awareness matters so much. Before you can change the conversation, you have to notice the conversation. And most people don't. They notice the result. They notice that they feel stressed. They notice that they keep postponing decisions. They notice that they avoid looking at their finances. They notice that they hesitate when an opportunity appears. But they don't always stop to ask what happened immediately before that reaction. What did I just tell myself? What assumption appeared? What story did my mind create? That question can change the way you see your own thoughts. Because a thought is not necessarily a fact. If your mind says, "I'll never be financially secure," you don't have to immediately believe it. You can simply notice it. There is a difference between saying, "I will never be financially secure," and saying, "I'm noticing the thought that I will never be financially secure." The second statement creates a little distance. And that distance gives you a choice. You don't have to fight the thought. You don't have to force yourself to believe the opposite. You don't need to pretend everything is perfect. You simply become the observer. This is where your inner dialogue starts becoming useful. Instead of allowing every thought to become a command, you begin treating thoughts as information. Maybe your mind says, "I always make bad financial decisions." You can pause. Is that completely true? Or are there examples that don't fit the story? Maybe you've made mistakes. Everyone does. But perhaps you've also learned something. Perhaps you've paid something off. Perhaps you've saved money at some point. Perhaps you've made a responsible decision that nobody else noticed. The goal isn't to create a fantasy. The goal is to create a more accurate conversation. And sometimes a more accurate thought is much more powerful than an exaggerated positive affirmation. Instead of saying, "Money is going to come to me effortlessly," you might say, "I can learn to make better decisions with money." Instead of, "Everything will always work out," you might say, "I can handle one decision at a time." Instead of, "I'm behind everyone else," you might say, "My progress doesn't have to look like someone else's." Notice the difference. These statements don't require you to deny reality. They create room for possibility, and that room can affect your behavior. When you believe you can learn, you're more likely to practice. When you believe you can improve, you're more likely to try again. When you believe one mistake doesn't define you, you're more willing to make another decision. Little by little, the internal conversation can influence the external behavior. And this is where manifestation can be viewed in a practical way. Many people describe manifestation as changing their outer circumstances through their thoughts and beliefs. Whether you personally see it that way or not, there is a useful principle here. What you repeatedly focus on can influence what you notice. What you notice can influence what you choose. And what you repeatedly choose can shape the direction of your life. So your inner dialogue matters not because every thought instantly creates reality. It matters because repeated thoughts can become expectations. Expectations can influence attention. Attention can influence behavior. And behavior, repeated over time, can produce very different results. Now I want you to try something simple today. Don't attempt to monitor every thought you have. That would become exhausting. Instead, choose one area where your inner dialogue is especially noticeable. For example, money. For the next 24 hours, whenever you notice a strong emotional reaction connected to money, pause for a few seconds. Don't correct the thought. Don't judge it. Just ask yourself, what did I just tell myself? Maybe the answer is, I can't afford anything. Maybe it's, I'm always struggling. Maybe it's, I should be further ahead. Or maybe you discover something completely different. Write down a few of the sentences you notice. Not because those sentences are necessarily true. Write them down because you are learning the language your mind has been repeating. Then, later in the day, look at one of those sentences and ask a second question. What would be a more balanced way to say this? Not a perfect way. Not an unrealistic way. A balanced way. If your thought is, I never have enough money, perhaps the new sentence is, I'm learning to become more intentional with the money I have. If your thought is, I'll never get ahead, perhaps you change it to, I can take one useful step today. That small shift may seem insignificant, but remember what we're talking about. Patterns are built from small repetitions. You don't need to completely change your personality in one afternoon. You simply need to become more aware of the conversation that has been running automatically. And tomorrow, you can notice something else. Then the next day, another pattern. Little by little, you begin creating a different relationship with your own thoughts. Some people find that this practice also changes how they respond emotionally. They catch themselves earlier. They recognize familiar assumptions. They pause before making impulsive decisions. They become more aware of the difference between a real problem and the story their mind has attached to that problem. That awareness is valuable because the goal isn't to eliminate negative thoughts. Negative thoughts are part of being human. The goal is to stop giving every thought unlimited authority. You can have a fearful thought and still take a wise action. You can feel uncertain and still move forward. You can experience a setback without turning it into an identity. And you can notice an old belief without automatically repeating it. Think about how different your day might feel if your inner voice became slightly more supportive, more realistic, and more patient. Not constantly positive, just more conscious. When something goes wrong, instead of immediately saying, "This always happens to me," you might pause and say, "This didn't go the way I wanted. What can I do next?" When you make a financial mistake, instead of saying, "I'm terrible with money," you might say, "What can this teach me?" When an opportunity appears, instead of immediately thinking, "That's probably not for someone like me," you might ask, "What would happen if I explored it?" Those questions create movement. And sometimes movement is exactly what a stuck pattern needs. So tonight, before you go to sleep, give yourself 2 or 3 quiet minutes. Think back over the day. Remember one moment when your emotions became strong. Maybe it was about money. Maybe it was about work. Maybe it was about your future. Then remember what you said to yourself in that moment. Don't criticize the thought. Simply observe it. Ask yourself, is this the kind of inner dialogue I want to keep repeating? And if the answer is no, choose one more balanced sentence you can practice tomorrow. That's all. One thought, one pause, one conscious response. You don't need to force a new identity overnight. You are simply giving your mind a different pattern to practice. And with repetition, small changes in awareness can become easier to access. Maybe you've spent years speaking to yourself in a certain way without realizing how much influence those words had. Now you have the opportunity to listen. Because sometimes the first step toward changing your relationship with money, opportunity, and progress isn't changing what happens outside of you. It's noticing what you keep saying inside. If this video gave you something useful to think about, subscribe to the channel and stay with this daily journey. And before you leave, share one sentence you've noticed in your inner dialogue recently in the comments. You don't have to make it perfect. Just make it honest. Then come back tomorrow and continue the practice. You'll find additional resources in the description, and you can also check the pinned comment for the next step. Remember, consistency often matters more than a single powerful moment. One conscious thought today, another tomorrow. Little by little, you begin to notice the patterns that were always there.